To kick it off, Rob is the Regional Planning Commissioner of Waterloo, but he has many other responsibilities that I'll let him talk about. And we've heard about complete communities. Somebody's described him as the complete commissioner because he's got an awful lot of responsibilities that fit together. So I'll let you fill in the blanks. So please welcome Rob Horne.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure about complete. I've had 2 coffees. I'm getting more complete. Good morning, everybody. Great to be here. I have to tell you, I really struggled last night because this discussion can take us in so many different directions, but I am very, very grateful for the opportunity to talk about this. I wanted to, just before I get into the region of Waterloo, I wanted to make 2 observations. The first one is probably an apolitical political observation. So I would suggest the growth plan was started by the blue people, it was finished by the red people, and it was assisted by the orange people. I think that's a really good thing, and I'm going to come back to that. The second one is that infrastructure investment is not a hopeful incidental, it's an imperative. And I'm going to get into that today as well. For those of you who don't know the region of Waterloo, we are the 4th largest community in Ontario, the 10th largest in Canada. I think the last growth plan forecast pushed us up another 15,000 in expectation for growth. Great history in terms of manufacturing. 2008, we certainly suffered huge adjustments in that sector. Going from about 67,000 manufacturing jobs down to 40,000. The numbers probably don't matter as much as the magnitude of change. The numbers I just saw this week put us at about 59,000, and we have seen a wonderful marriage of tech sector and manufacturing, so our advanced manufacturing is quite robust and doing quite well in an extremely competitive environment. The other emerging piece of the puzzle, of course, is the tech sector. Just a couple of numbers. In 1997, we had about 1,900 tech sector jobs. Today, we sit at between 30 and 35,000 tech sector jobs and almost 1,000 different companies in the region. This is also a really big week for us. I'm very happy to share that Regional Council's Planning and Works Committee met this week and voted in favor of proceeding with a preferred proponent for our rapid transit initiative. And of course, I'm going to speak a little bit about that in terms of the imperative of that investment and what that investment has already meant. We're not planning for, we're actually experiencing change today. So that decision is to be considered by Regional Council in a couple of weeks. I believe the vote was 10-4, and committee is also council. So a very, very good and healthy public debate, and I would say as well, extremely gratifying that the public was so engaged through the entire process, and that's really what it's all about, getting our elected officials the information and analysis they need, getting the information out to the community, and setting the table for that good, healthy debate. So I'm going to focus in a little bit now on the growth plan, and as I said, it really goes in so many different directions. And to Paul's point, my responsibilities include development review, but I'm also in transit planning, community housing, museums, libraries, and of course the whole forecasting demographic side, and more recently economic development. So it really does afford me an opportunity to share with you sort of a wide breadth of things that make up our community, and by extension probably are touchstones for your community as well. So Paul did his best when we chatted earlier this week to try to sort of frame us in a little bit. But I really came up with so many comments that I'm going to touch on a number of things, and then just hope we can have some discussion when all the panelists are finished. So one of Paul's first questions was, so what have we accomplished so far? And I think this is where the whole issue of anchoring a vision has been absolutely essential. To me, the provincial growth plan is the most talked about piece of provincial policy that I have probably ever seen. It has more an on-the-street presence than legislation that I've seen, and it seems to be talked about in a fairly comfortable way. To me, it embodies good planning. period. But I think when we talk about communities having to be sustainable or more sustainable, it finally gets at what those elements are, and I think that's a real positive. In terms of the region of Waterloo, we actually had a growth management strategy approved by Regional Council in 2003. So I would suggest to you that our growth plan is about 11 years old, whereas the provincial growth plan is about 7, and I think we've got a little bit more velocity. Larry mentioned a little bit about the performance indicators. I'm hopeful that everybody's going to really put their shoulder behind that, have a look at those indicators. And I wanted to share a few metrics with you as well, because I think we all have a bit of work to do. The province has to obviously get to an apples-to-apples comparison. That's never an easy task. We are pretty vigilant in collecting data. Most of our data is based on building permit issuance, and I would say on that basis it's pretty robust. So a couple of things. The residential development rate within the built boundary, our 4-year average is 53%. It was 55% last year. Industrial, commercial, institutional is at least 50% by square footage within the built boundary. Subdivision densities are running at least at 50. We've got a few subdivisions that are over 70, so to the point made this morning, and I would suggest to you they are very well designed, very linked, and very much contain that full mix of housing. The development industry really needs to be commended for rising to the fore. I think as well we need to be really vigilant around the fact that we need to avoid the polarities, the polarity of public policy and the polarity of development. I think more than ever the development industry has shown that it has risen to the occasion in our community and found that sweet spot in terms of marketability, and they're doing extremely well. We've got lots of great examples of intensification, low to medium rise, and comment made this morning about, by Paul, a whole lot of space within the built-up area. I couldn't agree more. And it doesn't have to be a series of very, very tall buildings across Ontario. To me, there's lots of room to accommodate additional growth. The other thing I would say in terms of greenfields is that we maintain a supply of about 25,000 units right now. The number probably doesn't mean much, but consider the fact that a fairly strong building year in our community is 3,000 units, of which half or more is within the built-up area. So it's a pretty significant supply, and the consumer still has that element of choice. So just back to what have we accomplished so far. I've talked about increased public awareness, but I hope by implication you can see that the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe and our growth plan are very aligned, very, very much aligned. And I think in that respect we had a little bit more velocity when the growth plan came out in terms of we've embarked, and it actually did bolster our cause in a number of areas. So what changes are needed to make it all work better? So that was Paul's second question. And I'm going to go very quickly on a number of these, and forgive my indelicacy around some of them, because I think A, the devil's in the details, and B, if we don't talk about implementation, honestly, we're doing all of ourselves a great disservice. I think the growth plan needs to be unequivocally clear. I have seen, I can't remember how many iterations or interpretations of the growth plan by the Ontario Municipal Board. The usual example that we also roll out is that the province says that municipalities must amend their official plans. We amend the official plans to conform. The plan gets appealed to the board, and the board has yet another version of what the growth plan means. We really need to tighten that up and to provide clarity. And I think that's where we need to help the province when it does go through the complete amendment. Likewise, I think when we're at the Ontario Municipal Board, and there are cases where differences will arise, we really do need the province to be in attendance to indicate, yes, they've issued their notice of decision, yes, the plan conforms, the official plan conforms to the growth plan, and this is how it's done. And I think it's a way to educate the presiding board members and to inform them exactly how the province arrived at that decision. I think the province as well has to be very vigilant that it has a consistent view of how the growth plan is applied across Ontario. And of course, there's a lot of staff and a lot of people, when we break it down to the human element, who are issuing those notices of decision, making some decisions, excuse me, in a local context. And there are marked differences in communities. We heard a little bit about the economic side of the growth plan and a little bit about where we stand in terms of the provincial economy. I couldn't agree more. I think the growth plan needs significant overhaul in the area of employment lands. Our personal experience is that we together struggled to define the quantum of employment lands that were required, but we also struggled with the province to say employment lands are so locationally sensitive and sensitive to other market needs that it's not straight math. So I think the growth plan really needs to go back and provide some additional latitude. We've been having some really great early discussions with the province as well, and I have to thank them for that, and Larry for that too, about so how do we go about this? How do we actually do that? Because I couldn't agree more with the gentleman in the corner here that we better have economic competitiveness front and center to everything that we're doing. Some of our discussions have been around strategic employment lands, so around the 400 series highways or for other reasons, lands that are strategic. Let's provide a framework within which the lands can be created. But the trick, of course, is how can they be protected? And as we stand in the City of Toronto today, I think there's over 100 applications, as I recall, for employment land conversion. And I understand why. There's a very compelling financial case to be made for that conversion. But how do we have more latitude to create employment land and be nimble in the marketplace, but also to protect those lands? Lots of discussion about financing tools, and I see John Howe here as well. I really do want to go back to Metrolinx, and Paul, you've been part of that as well. In terms of raising the whole notion of financing tools, like we really do have to put that out. Money has to come from somewhere. Absolutely important. Our council as well has, through the Development Charges Review, asked for rapid transit entitlement on a 10-year forward-looking level of service and the elimination of the discounting. I mean, I think we have to step up. We have to recognize that all of this has to be paid somehow. Does growth pay for growth, or is there a shift onto the tax base? I mean, those are local political decisions, but the tools and the entitlements really need to be more properly balanced and vested, and that really is a reflection on how those tools are aligned with the growth plan vision. Excuse me. So how to move forward? Again, I think the growth plan in concept is quite simple. As I said, it's about good planning, but I really come back to quality of life and economic competitiveness. So I think the implementation, the complete implementation, is not a matter of political courage. It's a political imperative. And I go back to my first comment talking about an apolitical political observation. I really do think it is a political imperative. I think the growth plan, in our case, has been successfully tied to infrastructure investment. Without the province's investment of $300 million in our rapid transit system, we wouldn't have the success we're already seeing. So some of the metrics I gave you this morning are already demonstrating that investment is choosing to be on or very near our rapid transit line. We certainly have a number of developers who have told us as much. One of the other challenges I think we have to face head on as well is financial institutions and their comfort with more traditional forms of development. It's a new world. Some of these, the newer forms of development, less well known, perhaps some higher risk coming with it. But again, it's a paradigm shift for the financial institutions, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to get some acclimation amongst the financial sector as well. I think as well, and I think it's critical that we explain to the public the imperative of what we're doing. And, we talk about status quo, but I think we really need to drill down and talk about, well, what does that actually mean to you? For the many people suffering through traffic every morning, it's not a difficult conversation to have. Just on the area of infrastructure investment as well, I'd be remiss if I didn't share one story about what's becoming a familiar observation by our regional council. When the province expands highways through our area, usually 401, and it's an expansion of a few lanes, the question that comes up typically is, why isn't the investment going into GO? And I think it is an observation and a debate that we all need to grab onto a little bit more. The more lanes we add, the less we're behind in terms of number of years that we're behind on the demand side. So, there is that bigger picture as well. So I'm going to stop there and bring it back to the slide that I did choose, because Paul said we could only have one picture, and I thought, well, I'll do a mosaic. So, it's really about the legacy that previous generations had given us, and how do we apply that lens, the 3 slides in the middle of sustainability, so environmental protection, social well-being, and economic prosperity, and how do we set that table for our next generations? So I look forward to some great debate, and I thank you very much.